we're going to go back and we're kind of going to go oscillate back and forth about, here's the expectation, here's the reality, and all that. And I want to be real clear here. We would not be representing Office 365 if we didn't think it was a very good product. We would not be presenting these tools such as Lync, such as SharePoint, such as OneDrive, such as Project Online, such as whatever, if they weren't compelling tools that can be used, especially for the small, medium businesses, because you don't have the capital investment. You don't have to buy servers or the like, all right? That said, on the other side of the fence, it ain't this thing where you install it and it works perfectly for everybody under every circumstance, no matter what device you use. And part of the thing that we think is important is you need to understand where it works well, but you also need to understand here are some areas where it's a little bit on the weak side. All right? And the odds are so will every other competitive product, or you're going to pay more for it. All right? And this is especially true when we start talking about what can you do with non-Windows devices. And part of the challenge, we're going to talk about this, and Kevin and I were talking about this right before we came over here. It is changing literally monthly. Microsoft has updated their tool sets for the mobile devices almost every month this year. So if someone says, hey, I'd like to do this with this device, with these employees, non-employees, whatever, you need to make absolutely sure that you've got the right plan, the right product, and the right tool. Especially if you're going to be making the investment based on the assumption. Okay, and we'll go over that. Okay, this is an offer. Part of the challenge is to know which is the right plan, what are the right tools, what are the right features, all that kind of fun stuff. And so what we're going to do, we're offering this, and essentially it's a let's sit down, we'll talk over what your needs are, make sure it's the right plan, make sure blah, blah, blah. We'll set up, the 30-day trial is the especially big value because you can do that all on your own, you don't need us. But we'll do this for $299, and then if you bring us on board to actually help with the migration, we'll credit you that $299, so it ends up being free. So if you're interested in that, contact John, contact myself, blah, blah, blah. Here is where we get to, and these are meaningful, but they're a little over the top to a certain degree. So what we have is the challenges that we have. All right, people who don't work in the same location need to work together, the whole term of collaboration. All right, collaboration, we're used to that whole collaboration concept being, I'll email you the changes. Then you email me the changes, and then I'll email you the changes. That, to a certain degree, is very ancient, but actually that was the best way to do it until a few years ago. All right? Work on many devices. A year ago, this was wishful thinking. The BYOD, and we did BYOD was our topic a couple months ago, and one of the things we talked about was that whole abdication that some companies have done by basically saying, whatever you bring in to work, we'll let you have access to data, we'll let you have access to, well, not necessarily the best practice, but sometimes you don't have a choice. Okay, and that choice may be because you're actually looking to work with people who aren't members of your organization, so you can't tell them what to do or what they can't do. But we need to at least engage that concept. Okay? Managing complex infrastructure takes our IT away from the important projects. That was such a natural sentence for someone to say. You could just tell that they meant it sincerely. Here's the thing. When we talk about infrastructure, we'll start with it's the stuff with the blinking lights. All right? The more infrastructure your organization owns, the more capital expense you have in terms of buying that infrastructure to start with, and then the more operational expense you have in terms of paying people to maintain it, to operate it, to configure it, and to work with it. Now, with some companies, you really want to have a tremendous amount of flexibility in terms of what that infrastructure does and your special needs. In which case, great. It's your infrastructure. You can have it configured however you want to. But in a lot of cases, we just want the stuff to work. So you're willing to accept something that is less infrastructure purchasing and more service. And we'll talk about the difference in that. Okay? So here's, as they point out, the Office in the cloud. Every one of these, with the exception of business class email, Every one of these is kind of a good feature. Every one of these features has limitations, and every one of these features have some tremendous flexibilities. Okay? So let's talk about this a little bit. First of all, concept of 365. How many of you have never heard of Office 365? Okay. So Office 365 is a cloud service. Cloud. What is the cloud as far as purposes for this discussion? It's whatever you want it to be, because I'm a consultant, I don't want to make money from you. Okay? But the real key thing as far as cloud goes is it's stuff that isn't within your facility, that's connected through the internet somehow. That's what cloud means. Right? The service is the key thing. So the service is you're paying a fee based on your usage of a service. You don't have dedicated hardware or, for that matter, dedicated software. You're simply using a service. Okay? And in a lot of cases, companies are turning into service consumers as opposed to purchasing the software and then worrying about updates and all that kind of fun stuff. So the biggest thing that companies use it for, email. So we have servers that are up in the cloud that are run by a third party, in this case Microsoft, that control and manage sending and receiving all emails to your organization. And your organization is determined by the domain at simplex-it.com. Okay? Now, with 365, you can actually do what's called a hybrid. So you can still have a local server and a local Exchange server if you want to. Now, for the most part, small, medium organizations, I don't think that's necessary or appropriate, and it adds some additional cost and complexity, but it's there. Okay? But the email, we're pretty much there now. So that having the email, we all know it's pretty much, I go to my Outlook, I send and receive emails, I do calendar sharing, I do contact sharing, and it pretty much works. So I'm actually just going to say that's a commodity. Business class email is a commodity. There's all sorts of other things that we can add to it. We can add archival, we can add discovery, we can add controls in terms of longevity, how long we want to keep the emails, but by and large, it's a commodity. Okay? File sharing. Okay. File sharing, here's the key with file sharing. When we talk about file sharing, we first talk about in our location we have a network, and that network has stuff on the server. Well, that's file sharing, isn't it? Yeah, because we have to have multiple people. Then we have people from the outside trying to connect in, which we did through VPN. Okay, we can do that, but that gets kind of slow. Plus, it can be expensive, and how do you configure it, and all that kind of fun stuff. All right, so let's put stuff up in the cloud. Oh, we'll use Dropbox. Or we'll use any of those free services that are free because they are not corporate level. And we've talked about this before. But it's limited. It's more on the consumer level. So we have issues, and we need to talk about that. HD video conferencing in general. And we'll talk about that as far as link goes. Technical support. It always works, so who needs technical? All cloud services fail. Okay? I don't care whose it is. And we can talk about Amazon outages, we can talk about Google outages, we can talk about Microsoft outages, we can talk about anybody's outages. Anyone who sells, especially if you're dealing with a commodity level service, commodity meaning you're paying a low cost and you're with everybody else, there is a propensity for service outage that hasn't resulted in lost data, but it has ended up with interruption of service. Okay? The nice thing is that the provider, in this case Microsoft, is the technical support. So they will be the ones who will take care of those outages or work with you. Not necessarily on your desktop, which is why you need a company to actually help and support you on these things. I would recommend us. Probably. Financially backed SLA. I'm sorry, I don't care. The financially backed SLA is basically saying if your critical corporate service goes down, we'll pay you a couple bucks. Because if we lose email for 24 hours or for 12 hours or for 6 hours, getting a check for $30 or a credit is really going to make all the difference in the world. Yes, we lost business. Yes, we lost a couple $1,000s in terms of customer satisfaction and support, but we can get pizza tonight. It's nice that it's there. Yes, it's a nice marketing piece, but quite honestly, I don't really care on that one. Simple IT management. It really should say Simplex-IT management because that's the name of the company. The nice thing is that since we have removed the infrastructure, the components, the servers, we're basically, the management is more the service management. So we're managing what the user experience should be, what the user needs are. So we've taken a huge chunk of the management away, a good part of which we can't do it even if we wanted to, but for the most part we don't want to. And we've replaced it with, for the most part, you've got two types of management for these tools. You've either got web interface, because there's a web portal for these services where you can set up users, configure them, or, I have to say it, Powershell. Powershell is my arch enemy, just simply because it's a batch programming, and we went to GUI. Now we're going back. Anyway, we have a long-standing feud in the office about PowerShell. So you've got tools, but it's a much simpler management than we had before. Anywhere access. It's one thing to say anywhere access for companies who are basically saying, go to the web and go online, you can see your data, you can access your data. What about when you're not online? Can you still see your data? Can you still access information? And that's one of the things where a number of these services, especially, because you have this, you're on your device, you're on somebody else's device, you're online, you're offline, you're going for this data, you're going for this data. And part of, just like we were talking about for the mobile devices, you need to know what your expectations are as far as when people are going to be able to do their jobs and to do what. So that you can say, yes, that this service, whatever service we're looking for, actually fulfills those requirements. And 365 actually does a much better job, I think, than most of its competitors as far as this goes, especially in terms of arranging to have offline access to the data. Okay, it is very simple to have your data, so even if you're not connected to the internet, you can work on your data. And then, when you're back connected to the internet, it'll automatically update both ways. Very easy to do with 365. Okay? And then we have Office. And we're not going to spend a huge amount of time on this except for, you'll notice we have the desktop apps. That's what's installed on your PC or Mac. It is the full-blown, as if you bought it at Best Buy, assuming anybody still buys anything at Best Buy, full-blown application. No ifs, ands, or buts. You also have the mobile application, the web-based. I want to be real clear here. Web ain't as good as the local. The local can be a much more powerful program than the web-based. But if you're not at your machine, the web-based is pretty good. Okay. Also, the mobile is, that's the Office Online. The mobile is on these guys. And this is literally changing monthly. So far this year, what do we say, 5 updates? There's been about 5 updates that have significantly enhanced, and almost all these changes are improvements. So you have the ability now to actually have a version of Office on your Android phone, on your iPhone. Notice I didn't say tablets on either one of those. You can also have individual applications such as Word, PowerPoint, Excel on your iPad and Android tablet, right? Not the tablet. Not the Android tablet yet. Okay? So, but it changes. So literally what you can do this month is different than what you could do last month, is different than what you could do the month before. Now, in almost all cases, you can do more today than you could before. And one of the nice things as far as a service goes, you have access to all those things if you are in Office 365. So you don't have to worry about, oh, the latest version came out, I bought it last month. You can still install it. And one of the other nice things about the licensing for this is if you have a user who has a 365 license that includes Office, they can install that Office on up to 5 devices for the same monthly fee. Oh, that got people writing. So, I have my laptop. I have my tablet. I have my phone. I have an iPad. I think I've got another tablet somewhere. I can have the full feature of Office that each of those devices can do on each of those machines for that one subscription fee. There is no other Microsoft licensing program that will give you that flexibility. Okay? So if you have an environment where you have people where the individual users have multiple devices, this is a deal. And to be clear, you don't have to, and this is what we refer to as the E3, if you're going enterprise level, you don't have to only go, everybody gets E3. If you have some people who, well, you're only working at one computer and you already got a copy of Office with it, so we won't get you the full-featured subscription. You'll get everything else, and you've already got a copy of Office. So you can mix and match. So, any questions on that? Yeah.
When you have the subscription that includes Office on multiple computers, how does it license or work when that computer might have multiple users?
Good question. So you have multiple users logging on. Essentially, this is all user-based. So when anyone on that computer tries to use, let's just say Word, Office will, on occasion, like every 2 weeks, does that sound about right? About every 2 weeks, will send credentials up to 365 to verify the subscription. Send a token? Okay. Not credentials. Yeah, good. So, but in order to do that, it may ask the user to log on with that valid account, which means that if you've got one user with that valid 365 subscription and then you have multiple users who don't have the valid 365 subscription, they're not going to know what those credentials are. So they won't be able to help send that token. All right, so technically from a licensing standpoint, you're out of compliance. Okay.
That would also ask the question, what if people piggyback?
Yeah, and again, this is user-based. So a license, and this is important because in a lot of Microsoft licensing worlds, you have the ability to do either user or device-based licensing. In 365, it's user. So the user has an account. Now, for organizations that have the need, where you have like a kiosk or a community machine, what you can do is buy one license of Office for that machine. And for each machine that falls under that category. You can do a combination of things. So you kind of get the best of both worlds. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Again, you can have these for the iPad, for the Android, for the PC, and it is changing. And part of what we've been posting, both on Twitter and our newsletter, has been when Microsoft's been coming out with the new tools, we've been posting them out there. All right, and it happens frequently. The new CEO has made this a priority to become less Wintel-centric and more service-centric. All right? Access your documents wherever you go. This works for both SharePoint as well as for OneDrive. So what you can do is, let me see if I can. This is set up with a Microsoft demo account. So I am Katie Jordan. It's time I come clean. Please don't tell my wife. I haven't surprised her yet with the news. So what we can do, and what I'm doing now is I'm basically just showing the SharePoint. But you'll also notice, so we have files that we can just simply see. Or no, this is the OneDrive. So just using the cloud, the web-based, I can go to my sites, I can go to my OneDrive, and I can literally drag files to this. Your mileage may vary depending upon how your browser's set up, and if you have Chrome, it's a little different, so on and so forth, but there's plenty of ways to make it behave this way. I can just drag files to my browser to add files to upload. I can also go into upload to upload them and all that kind of thing. But the other thing that I can do is sync. And you'll notice all I have to do is click on this button, and this will end up synchronizing everything to my computer here. It is there for OneDrive folders. It is there for SharePoint folders. And what that does is that will actually set up, if I go over here, an area under favorites that will show, and we're going to see how well this works. So I'm just going to sync now. I have to do this once. And when I do that, and I've got a dialog box, just say sync now. Look at that. That's now local on my computer once the synchronization is done. Which means that from an end user standpoint, they can use the same Windows navigation stuff that they've seen before to go open files, work with them, do whatever they want to. I mean, I hate to say this because it's overused. It's that simple. So I now have it so that this device automatically synchronizes everything in the folder that I chose to synchronize. I don't have to do anything, and the little green check boxes means that it's synchronized. It's successfully. The copies are the same.
Is it caching it locally? And if so, are there rules that state like longevity on the files themselves, or
No.
is it just whenever you say it?
So whenever you change things, or whenever they're changed up in the cloud, automatic synchronization. You do have some issues that will happen in terms of collisions. You know, if two people, or if you end up making changes on two different systems, but you can choose which one to keep and the like. So here's what I just did. I just copied a file over to the OneDrive folder. And you'll notice now we've got this little arrows. That indicates that there's synchronization going on. So it noticed immediately that there actually is there was a file that I added, and so it knows that it has to do synchronization. Now it's a 4 meg file, so it takes a long time, like 30 seconds, and now that file's there. So let's go back up to here, and boom. So it basically updated that file. It says 4 hours ago because I actually worked on the file 4 hours ago. So it's already there. And any other device that I have synchronizing, it will copy down to that machine as well immediately. Yeah. As long as it's connected, yeah, absolutely. Good question. Have there been issues regarding file sizes? No, but there have been issues if you add a large number of files at one time. So if you dump like 5,000 files in at one time, it gets congested. So you want to try to, yeah, and there are limits.
Yeah, the maximum file size, I don't remember what it is off the top of my head, unfortunately.
But it's not
for
50
a single
meg.
file. I want to say it's like no bigger than 1 gig a file at a time. But
Yeah.
if you have 20 gig of storage total, you can add 21 gig files, but you can never have a 1.1 gig file.
That sounds about right. And 1 terabyte, is that the storage now?
In OneDrive.
Yeah, in OneDrive.
1 terabyte of storage.
Keep Visio and Project in mind. How many of you are interested in Visio or Project? Anybody? Okay, cool. There is a 365 version of both Visio and Project. And no, I don't think, well, as far as the subscription goes, with a subscription, if you subscribe to Office 365 E3, it includes Publisher and Access and all that kind of thing. But it doesn't include Visio or Microsoft Project. There is, and actually it is a fairly decent way to do Project Server without investing in Project Server. We've got a couple clients who are doing that, and actually it looks pretty sweet. And the other thing that you can do, I can share with people. So all I have to do is I can add people who are part of my organization. Actually, I'm going to do that slightly different. create a test folder, and it will synchronize. Now I just want to share with specific people. And I can add anybody within the organization or people who have profiles on this computer or people who are not part of our organization at all. So I can choose. So this is a great alternative either to FTP or to emailing huge attachments, or even worse, breaking up huge attachments so they'll fit on the email. And this stays. So if, let's say, as an example, let's say a company has 5 people or 5 different customers that they deal with regularly, or you as an individual have 5, you can set up 5 different folders, give those people permissions to read only or read and write to those folders, even if they're not part of your organization. And they can just use that link to download any files you've done or open them or update them if you've given them the ability to do that. It's built in there.
Work with SharePoint.
It's much easier to do. SharePoint, you can do the same thing, but SharePoint has a much more, I'll call it robust security model.
But you can't, like we have SharePoint on-prem, so we can't share with anyone outside of our Active Directory.
It depends on how you've set your SharePoint up and what version. The answer is yes, you can. But depending upon how it was configured and all that, it may be for the best of security reasons they made it so that you couldn't. But in actuality, you could. What version of SharePoint offhand? 2013. 2013? Yeah, you can do it. Yeah, as far as the ability to do it, yep, that's in there. As far as whether or not your firewall's set up for it, whether you've got the IPs, all of that kind of stuff. There's a bunch of ways. There's a bunch of things you'd have to go through. Does that help? Mm-hmm. Cool. So far, I've only made up one answer. So we're doing real good. Good question. So the question is whether or not there's a tool or site or whatever. And the answer is sure, there's several. Okay? There's actually a worksheet that Microsoft has that is a questionnaire that will help you choose your plan. If you want to let John know or put it on your whatever, your card, we can send that to you. It's just an Excel sheet. We're also part of that offer we had. We're happy to talk to you about it. You can also sign up for the E3, the 30-day trial. And there you can knock it out of the park, do whatever you want to it, and you can choose at the end of the 30 days whether to keep it or whether, in which case you can build on it, or to drop it and start over again with a quote-unquote better understanding of what you've got. So you've got several options. So, but the key thing that I would say is what you start with is start with a list of 10 items or less. I want to be able to do this. Okay? And here's the function, here's the people who need to do it, and here's the equipment they need to do it with, and here's the locations. That should be your first point. I mean, if you want to look at the 365, get a feel for what some of the options are, absolutely great. But if you don't have those, here's my needs. You're shopping, you're shopping at the grocery store while hungry. Whatever that means.
Can I run a QuickBooks data file out of either OneDrive or SharePoint?
Boy, can you? For all purposes, you sort of can, but I would be extremely concerned about the problem with that is that you have a data file that is volatile. It gets changed constantly. It may work, but I don't think it's going to be pretty.
I don't think it's supported.
Yeah. And the reason it's supported is because you keep that file open all of the time. When you close the application, it would then finish the synchronization, and then in theory that file would be stable. But I wouldn't treat that the same way. And the problem is not so much is if you and I are both synchronizing the same folder and you and I go both work on the same file at the same time, it's pretty simple. One will win, one will lose, one will become the previous version, one will. If you're both working on a QuickBooks data file at the same time, no, collisions are not pretty, they're not going to end well, and neither of us are going to be happy. So that's why they start talking about it's not supported. Yeah. And so can you remove the locally stored files? I can do better than that. I can remove the locally stored files from somebody who I don't like anymore. Okay, so the proverbial former employee. So I can remove as long as they're connected to the internet. Now, can they make a copy? And yeah, absolutely. But you have control over that. You also have the ability of wiping if they're doing it on the mobile phones. Now, be very careful about that, because in some cases, they're not talking about just wiping the data. They're talking about wiping the phone. So if you have an employee who became a former employee and they had like their iPhone and they had company data on their iPhone, and you go remote wipe, all their iPhone goes away. Which, I was just going to say, oh, sorry about that. Call IT. Oh, wait, you don't work here anymore. Good luck with that. As we point out, they have released a lot. It's going to continue. This literally does change so frequently, especially in terms of the Office applications and the capability, especially for like Link and the like, that's offline. So really, if you have specific needs in those areas, take a look and keep an eye on that. I do want to talk a little bit about Link. Link is by far and away the understated puppy. I think this is really a cool product. And when I first heard about Link being put out there, my immediate thought, because I am so keen and insightful on this, what a stupid idea. They basically, what it is it is a way to have video conferencing, content sharing, collaboration work, audio, video, record the meetings, all that, not just for people in your organization, but people outside of your organization as well. So all someone needs, as long as they don't have XP, all someone needs is a browser, and there's an add-on. Sounds similar to like GoToMeeting or the like. You can invite them through Outlook to join your meeting. They click on the link that's included in the meeting invite, boom, they're part of it. Okay, they can take part in the video, they can take part in what your screen sharings, all that kind of fun stuff. So, but to start with, what we end up with is it will work with your Outlook, so it'll show you people who you've identified as contacts within your organization. It'll read their Outlook calendar to just see if they're available, whether or not they've got something scheduled. And it'll also show you whether or not they're actually doing something on their computer. So if they haven't touched their computer for a while, it'll basically say away. And if you want to, then you can actually text someone, which will basically send an IM, and it'll send an IM depending upon where they've got Link, so they can have Link on their phones, their mobile devices, their tablets, whatever. You can then do a video, you can do an audio, you can do screen shares, do PowerPoint, you can do whiteboards, you can do, what are they called when you ask people questions, surveys? You can do all those things in the meetings. All right? This gives you a great way. So if you've got a sales force, we've got one client who's pardon my French, they're my poster children for this. They immediately start having now their weekly meeting on Link. And they've got about half a dozen or so, maybe half a dozen or so of their employees are off site, and then about another half a dozen or so are at the office. Now they can just do a video conference, no problem. It worked great. And they record the call, so if someone can't make it, here's the video. So you're not going to miss out on anything. It's just a great tool. Someone's having an issue, someone's having a problem. You and I are working on a contract. Don't get scared. And we've got a question on the verbiage. I can share my screen with you, and we can both look over the document, regardless of whether or not you have Link. And if you say you've got some ideas, instead of me just listening and typing out, say, here, you do it, I'm lazy. I'll give you control, and he can then make the changes. And he doesn't have to have Link. Okay? It's in there. I tell you, if you have 365 and it includes Link, use it, try it, test it. Let us know. We will be your guinea pigs. It is such a cool tool. Now, I will say, are there some problems with it? Guess what? The biggest challenge that I've seen is if you have systems that are put together with some of the audio or some of the video stuff where it's not quite, Microsoft selected or whatever, you may have to tweak with it the first time you go through it. But other than that, it's a pretty solid product. Okay, so absolutely use this. It's really cool. Any questions on that? Any other? Unfortunately, we are really pretty much running out of time. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Just a real quick one. With all this collaboration and files moving back and forth and letting people in other organizations use, if a file inadvertently gets deleted, or you got somebody who knows they're going to leave before you know they're going to leave, and some files get deleted, do those versions also get deleted, or is there a method of retrieving those? Because obviously with a cloud solution, we don't have backup in the traditional sense, but yet there's still opportunity for a file to inadvertently disappear.
Well, essentially, so it's a good question. So if you have essentially surrendered your information to the cloud provider, what happens as far as backups and all that kind of fun stuff? First of all, it depends on the service. If you have SharePoint and you're doing this in SharePoint, there's a lot of tiers of deleted files before they actually get fully removed. I think there's like 3 levels of deletion or that sort of thing. Same thing with OneDrive, all right? That said, there are more services, and one of our partners is a company called eFolder. We use them for cloud backups and the like, and they're just introducing now services that are specifically aimed at exactly that situation, where you can actually back up your SharePoint, your Exchange from 365 to their third-party service, where you would have that full level of control for exactly that situation. So, excuse me. So the bottom line is you have some granular control over the service depending upon what, how far back. Yeah, I deleted it 6 months ago. What are you going to do about it? Not much. Whereas if they delete it over the past couple of days or weeks, you've got some wiggle room. If you really are concerned beyond that, then you need to look at some additional tools, some of which, depending upon if you're looking at email versus SharePoint, some of which are actually part of Office 365. If you're looking at SharePoint or OneDrive, some of which are in addition to Office 365. Does that help?
Yeah.
Cool. Yes,
That
sir.
leads me to my next question. If you're a network administrator, do you have access to your employees' files without having them sharing the data, or do you not? Just not that.
Cool. So from an administrative standpoint, what kind of control do you have first in terms of allowing their access and then in terms of granting access? So first of all, you've got PowerShell. I hate PowerShell. Actually, I just like telling people I hate PowerShell because I do. With PowerShell, you can actually do some granular security modifications. So you can give yourself or someone's administrator or the like delegated access, one level or another, to their particular data. You can definitely do that on the Exchange side. It's easy. It's all over the place. On SharePoint, of course, it's the same thing. I think on OneDrive you have the same capability as well. So now, it's not as simple as like NTFS permissions. So you're going to have to be a little more creative in that. And one of the things, and actually there's one of our YouTube videos, it's about a year old, is actually using PowerShell with Office 365. It's a little dated right now because it was primarily on the Exchange standpoint, but that'll give you some ideas of some of the things that you can do. Does that make sense? Cool. Yes?
Okay. If you sync your cloud or your SharePoint to your PC, so you've got them on both, and then you want to delete a file, if you delete it on the PC and you sync again, it's going to put it back there?
No, other way. So you did an action to the file here. That action gets replicated up to the cloud. Whether you delete a file, then it's deleted in the cloud. If you change a file, then the change is pushed up in the cloud. So whatever you do.
Okay, but if you delete it from the cloud,
It'll be deleted from your local.
whichever the last action is.
Exactly.
Okay.
Wherever you do the action, that action is replicated. So you can have, like I was saying, I've got OneDrive on this, I've got OneDrive on this, I've got OneDrive on this, I've got OneDrive on a desktop at my office. If I add, edit, or change or delete any file on these guys, or if I just go to the cloud, that change will be replicated, as long as they're online, that change will be replicated to all of these devices automatically. Automatically. That sync button I hit, just had to do it once. That's it. It now knows to synchronize from now on.
Really?
Yep. Okay. So you figured out that I will lie. Okay.
If they're not online, I assume it catches up when they come online?
Yep.
Yes.
But what if you've made 2 or 3 changes in the meantime? Is it only gonna
The last.
be the last?
The last one wins. Yep. Yes, sir.
Is there any comments that you could share on PCI and HIPAA compliance?
No.
As far as the PCI and HIPAA compliance, there are some template configurations you can add that will be, especially on the Exchange side. There's more on the Exchange side than the SharePoint or the OneDrive. Really, Microsoft has done a better job than most as far as heading that way, but I would suggest there are some other third-party alternatives as well who have gone further. So it's good. It's going to be, in my opinion, it's better. It's going to be better than Google as far as what it does, and better than most of the others. We do another tool that's similar to OneDrive called Anchor through eFolder, and it is much more closer to HIPAA compliant. So, any other questions?